There is a kind of silence that says more than arguments ever could. It does not shout, beg, or chase. It simply steps back, closes the door softly, and leaves a person alone with everything they spent so long trying to avoid. For someone who has spent years mastering distance, deflection, and emotional escape, that silence can become the very thing that breaks them. Many people misunderstand what happens when someone emotionally unavailable pushes away a deeply caring person. On the surface, it can look like they win. They seem calm, unbothered, detached. They move on quickly, distract themselves, stay busy, and act like nothing touched them. Meanwhile, the caring one is left carrying confusion, pain, sleepless nights, and endless questions. It can seem unfair, as if one person loved deeply while the other walked away untouched. But what looks untouched on the outside is often a storm on the inside. Because when someone who gave patience, warmth, understanding, and repeated chances finally goes silent, something powerful begins to happen. The emotional supply of comfort disappears. The familiar presence that once absorbed their inconsistency is gone. The person who stayed through mixed signals, cold moments, disappearing acts, and half-hearted effort is no longer there to stabilize the chaos. And that is when the collapse often begins. Not always publicly, not always immediately, but internally, quietly, and sometimes in ways even they do not fully understand. If you are the one who gave everything and were met with distance, this message may heal something in you today, because the silence you thought meant nothing may have meant everything. The moment you stopped pleading, stopped explaining, stopped reaching, and simply withdrew your energy may have been the first time they were forced to feel the full weight of what they had done. At first, they rarely expect it. They are used to cycles, used to you coming back after being hurt, used to time softening consequences, used to your empathy translating their coldness into excuses, used to the idea that no matter how far they pull away, the connection will still be waiting when they feel lonely enough to return. That expectation becomes its own addiction. They start believing access to your heart is permanent. They assume your care has no expiration date. They think they can disappear when emotions feel intense and reappear when it feels convenient. They mistake your patience for endless tolerance. They confuse your understanding with weakness. So when silence arrives, it feels unreal. At first, they may think it is temporary. They may assume you just need space. They may tell themselves you are emotional and will calm down soon. They may expect another message, another explanation, another chance to reset the cycle without taking responsibility. But days pass, then more days, and the usual emotional doorway stays closed. No reassurance, no reaction, no pursuit, no energy reaching toward them. That is when the first crack forms, because silence removes the illusion of control. As long as you were responding, even angrily, they still had connection. Even conflict can feel like attachment. Even your pain still kept them emotionally relevant in your life. But silence offers nothing to hold on to. No proof they still matter. No evidence the bond is still available on demand. And for someone who depends on distance to feel safe, being distanced by you can feel terrifying. This is the part many people never see. The person who once acted unaffected may start checking their phone more often. They may reread old messages. They may notice the absence in random moments throughout the day. They may feel irritated without understanding why. They may seek distractions more aggressively because stillness now feels uncomfortable. Because your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects back everything they avoided feeling while you were present. The truth is, caring people often stay far longer than they should. They stay because they see potential. They stay because they know pain can make people shut down. They stay because they believe consistency can soften walls. They stay because their heart naturally tries to understand before it judges. They do not leave after one cold moment. They do not run after one misunderstanding. They give grace where others would give up. They offer patience where others would set immediate distance. They keep trying to communicate long after being misunderstood, and while that compassion is beautiful, it can also trap them, because the emotionally unavailable person grows accustomed to receiving love without having to fully return it. They begin to rely on your emotional labor without naming it. Your presence becomes the cushion that protects them from consequences. Every time they withdraw and you stay, it reinforces the idea that intimacy can be avoided without loss. You become the safe place they do not know how to appreciate. You become the understanding they never learned to give themselves. You become the warmth they consume while calling it too much. And because you care deeply, you often blame yourself when things fracture. You wonder if you were too emotional, too available, too patient, too forgiving, too intense, too loving. But often the real issue was never your depth, it was their discomfort with depth. They wanted connection without vulnerability, comfort without accountability, loyalty without consistency, closeness without exposure, and eventually, no caring soul can survive on crumbs forever. There comes a day when exhaustion becomes louder than hope, a day when explaining one more time feels empty, a day when crying changes nothing, a day when the heart realizes love cannot be built alone. That day often arrives quietly. No dramatic speech, no revenge, no grand exit, just silence, and that silence carries the weight of every ignored need, every lonely night beside someone emotionally absent, every second chance given to someone who treated access to your heart casually. When that silence begins, they often respond the way they always have: distance. They tell themselves they need space. They bury themselves in work. They seek entertainment. They flirt elsewhere. They stay busy. They act relieved, because avoidance survives through movement. If they keep going, maybe they will not have to feel what was lost, but the body remembers what the mind denies. The nervous system notices the missing messages. The routines feel different. The validation source is gone. The emotional anchor has disappeared, and suddenly the distance they once controlled starts controlling them. This is why many emotionally unavailable people feel strongest right after pushing someone away. In that moment, they feel escape. Pressure is gone, expectations are gone, emotional conversations are gone. They mistake relief for freedom, but relief is temporary when the bond was real. Once the initial space settles, emptiness enters. The house feels quieter, the victories feel flatter. The distractions need to be louder, the nights grow longer, and that is when they begin to realize they did not just remove conflict, they removed care. They removed the person who checked in, the person who noticed subtle changes in their mood, the person who celebrated small wins, the person who believed in them during low seasons, the person who kept offering connection despite resistance. They pushed away the very softness that made life feel less harsh, and now silence becomes heavy. Many viewers need to hear this clearly. Your silence is not punishment when it comes after repeated pain. It is protection. It is what happens when the heart has nothing left to prove. It is what happens when self-respect finally becomes stronger than attachment. Some people think caring souls go silent because they stopped loving. Often the opposite is true. They go silent because they loved so deeply that staying any longer would destroy them. They go silent because words were wasted. They go silent because explaining unmet needs to someone committed to misunderstanding becomes soul-draining. They go silent because love without reciprocity becomes grief, and when that kind of person finally leaves, the impact is profound, because they were not just a partner, a friend, or a connection. They were emotional atmosphere. They were warmth in the room. They were the one who kept reaching across the distance. Once that energy is gone, the emotionally unavailable person often faces a reality they never planned for. They miss what they minimized. They miss the care they called excessive. They miss the loyalty they took for granted. They miss the consistency they rarely matched. They miss the emotional safety they did not know how to value. But by now, silence has already started changing you too. While they are confronting absence, you are confronting truth. You begin seeing patterns clearly. You begin noticing how much effort came from your side. You begin feeling the exhaustion you ignored while trying to save the bond. You begin reclaiming energy that was once spent decoding mixed signals, and perhaps for the first time in a long time, peace starts to feel possible. This is why your silence can trigger collapse in them and healing in you at the same time. The same distance that destabilizes the one who relied on your availability can stabilize the one who was drowning in uncertainty. So if you are in that silent season now, do not assume nothing is happening. Silence is happening. Consequences are happening. Clarity is happening. Growth is happening. And somewhere behind closed doors, the person who once seemed unaffected may be learning that pushing away genuine love feels powerful only until it is truly gone. Because some people do not understand the value of warmth until they are left in the cold, and some people do not feel the loss of an empath when they are speaking. They feel it when the empath says nothing at all. And that is where the deeper unraveling begins, because once silence settles in, the surface reactions are only the first layer. The missed messages, the checking of phones, the temporary distractions, and the restless nights are only symptoms. What comes next reaches much deeper. It touches pride, identity, memory, and the hidden emotional hunger they spent years pretending not to have. Because when someone who was always available suddenly becomes unavailable, the ego feels it before the heart admits it. This is why many emotionally distant people do not first say, "I miss them." They first feel irritation, confusion, restlessness, and a strange sense that something is off. Their mind may frame it as annoyance. Why are you so quiet? Why did you disappear? Why are you acting different? Why are you not reacting the way you always did? But underneath those thoughts is something far more vulnerable: loss of control. As long as the cycle stayed predictable, they felt safe. They could withdraw, return, give little, receive much, and assume the connection would survive. Your responses, even painful ones, reassured them that the bond still revolved around their timing. They may never have said it out loud, but they relied on that certainty. Now silence removes it, and uncertainty is deeply unsettling for someone who built their life around emotional avoidance. They do not know where they stand with you. They do not know if they still matter. They do not know if someone else now holds the space they neglected. They do not know if they can come back later and find the same open door. So the ego panics. It may not look dramatic from the outside. It often appears as subtle behaviors: watching your activity from a distance, asking mutual connections indirect questions, suddenly posting more online, trying to look happy, busy, desired, unbothered, seeking attention in places that once felt optional. Why? Because when internal certainty collapses, external validation becomes emergency medicine. If they can be admired, chased, wanted, then maybe they do not have to face the possibility that they lost something real through their own behavior. But validation has a short shelf life. A compliment fades quickly. Attention from strangers lacks emotional depth. Temporary excitement cannot replace meaningful connection. So after the ego rush fades, the quiet returns, and quiet is where truth gets louder. This is why nighttime often hits the hardest. During the day, there are tasks, noise, people, deadlines, screens, motion, endless ways to stay mentally occupied. But at night, the world slows down, the room grows still, the mind has fewer places to run, and what they outran during daylight often catches them in darkness. That is when memories arrive uninvited: your voice in ordinary moments, your patience during their cold phases, the times you reached for them when they pulled away, the warmth they brushed aside because they assumed it would always be there. Night strips performance away. There is no audience to impress, no image to manage, no distraction strong enough to silence every thought. And for someone who has long depended on avoidance, this can feel overwhelming. They may toss and turn, wake up thinking of you, reach for their phone, type messages they never send, replay conversations, imagine alternate outcomes, tell themselves they are fine, then feel the ache return minutes later. Many people think missing someone is always soft and sentimental. But for avoidant personalities, missing someone can feel sharp, frustrating, even humiliating, because it forces them to need what they trained themselves not to need. Need feels dangerous to them. Dependence feels unsafe. Vulnerability feels like weakness. So rather than admit longing, they may become more emotionally chaotic in private. They might numb harder, work harder, party harder, flirt harder, withdraw harder, anything to avoid simply feeling what is there. But suppressed emotion rarely disappears. It changes form. It becomes anxiety, irritability, insomnia, restlessness, and an emptiness that no achievement seems to fix. And in those long, quiet hours, another process often begins. They start replaying everything. Not always because they suddenly became deeply self-aware. Sometimes it starts because the mind is searching for relief. It wants to understand why peace has not returned, why winning the distance does not feel like winning at all. So it scans the past. They remember the moment you looked hurt, and they dismissed it. The times you asked for reassurance, and they called it too much. The days you reached out sincerely, and they answered coldly. The opportunities they had to choose honesty, tenderness, effort, and did not. At first they may rewrite the story to protect themselves. You were too sensitive. You expected too much. The timing was wrong. They needed space. You pressured them. But as silence continues, those explanations often lose power. Because if you were truly the problem, why does your absence hurt this much? If the bond meant so little, why are your memories everywhere? If leaving was freedom, why does freedom feel empty? These questions are difficult because they point inward, and inward is where avoidant patterns feel most threatened. This is also the stage where many begin to realize they did not just lose a person, they lost a mirror. A deeply caring person reflects things others do not. They notice pain behind anger, fear behind withdrawal, tenderness beneath defenses. They often see potential beneath dysfunction. They hold space for wounds the avoidant hides from the world. That kind of presence can become invisible while it is available, but once it is gone, life can feel emotionally flatter. Not because no one else exists, but because not everyone offers that level of emotional attunement. Many connections are transactional, surface level, convenient, distracting. Few are deeply nourishing. And when someone pushes away nourishment repeatedly, they often do not recognize the value until they are starving for it. This is where delayed regret starts forming. Regret is rarely immediate for emotionally avoidant people because immediate feelings are often buried under relief. The breakup, the distance, the silence at first feels like pressure removed. But delayed regret emerges when the nervous system settles enough to register what was actually lost. Weeks later, months later, sometimes longer, they see someone treating you well. They hear a song tied to memories. They go through a hard season and realize the one person who used to care is no longer there. They enter shallow connections that expose what depth once felt like. They age emotionally another year without having built anything meaningful. And suddenly regret is not theoretical, it is personal, it is embodied. It is waking up with the realization that they had something many spend years searching for and mishandled it because they were more committed to self-protection than love. This regret can be intense, but it does not always lead to growth. That part matters. Some people feel regret and transform, others feel regret and seek relief. Transformation says, I need to face my patterns, learn emotional responsibility, become safe to love. Relief says, I need them back so this pain stops. Those are very different motivations. This is why viewers must be careful when silence finally brings someone back around. Regret can create movement without creating maturity. Missing you does not automatically mean they have changed. Pain can motivate contact just as strongly as love can. And yet, whether they reach out or stay hidden, the collapse is already happening in another sense. The identity they built around not needing anyone begins to crack. Because now they need closure, reassurance, a response to know if the door is still open, to know they were not easily replaced, to know they still matter. The person who once seemed unreachable may now be privately wrestling with needs they judged in others. This irony is often painful. They criticized emotional dependence while secretly depending on your consistency. They dismissed your need for connection while relying on your presence. They called you intense while benefiting from your depth. Now silence reveals the dependency they never named. And while all of this unfolds in them, something sacred can be unfolding in you. You begin sleeping better, thinking clearer, laughing more naturally, feeling your own energy return. You stop obsessing over every mixed signal because the signal is now obvious. Inconsistency was never love. You stop romanticizing potential and start respecting reality. You stop confusing pain with passion. You stop shrinking yourself to fit someone else's emotional limitations. That healing can feel strange at first because chaos was once familiar. Peace may seem quiet, even empty. But in time you realize peace is not emptiness. It is space where your nervous system can finally rest. So if you wonder whether your silence mattered, understand this. Silence often begins the emotional timeline they postponed for years. While you were chasing, they could avoid feeling. When you stopped, feeling became unavoidable. And that is why some collapses happen long after the separation. Not because they loved too late, but because they only face truth when there is no longer anyone buffering them from it. The nights become mirrors, the memories become teachers, the regret becomes heavier, and the silence they once expected from themselves becomes the silence they cannot escape from you. And once regret begins pressing against the walls they built, another conflict starts to grow inside them. It is one of the most exhausting battles an emotionally avoidant person can experience. The desire to reach out rises at the exact same time. The fear of vulnerability rises with it. They want contact, but contact means exposure. They want relief, but relief may require honesty. They want to know if you still care, but asking that question risks hearing the answer they fear most. So they stand at the edge of connection and retreat from it repeatedly. This is why many people who once seemed distant suddenly become inconsistent in a new way. They may appear near, then disappear again. They may watch from afar but say nothing. They may type a message and erase it. They may think about calling and decide against it. They may imagine reconciliation but freeze when real effort is required. To the outside world, this can look confusing. To them, it feels terrifying, because reaching out to someone they hurt means facing themselves. It means acknowledging that the silence was not random. It came from pain. It came from repeated emotional neglect. It came from consequences they can no longer blame on timing or misunderstanding. And accountability is often harder for avoidant people than loneliness. Loneliness hurts, but accountability threatens identity. If they admit they mishandled someone genuine, then the story that they were simply independent, busy, or not ready starts to fall apart. They must face that sometimes they were not unavailable because life was complicated. They were unavailable because intimacy scared them. They were inconsistent because emotional responsibility felt heavy. They were cold because warmth would have required openness. That truth is difficult to carry. So instead of direct vulnerability, many choose safer forms of contact. A casual message, a random reaction to something online, a check-in that says little but tests much, a memory shared out of nowhere, a vague statement designed to reopen conversation without admitting regret. These small gestures are often called breadcrumbs because they offer tiny pieces instead of a full meal. They create curiosity without clarity, movement without commitment, presence without true accountability. And for someone still healing, breadcrumbs can be dangerous, because the heart remembers the whole relationship, not just the tiny message. One small sign can awaken hope, longing, nostalgia, and the old desire to believe this time will be different. That is why discernment matters now more than emotion. A message is not transformation. Missing you is not the same as becoming safe for you. Feeling lonely is not the same as learning how to love. If someone returns with the same vagueness, same avoidance, same half-effort, then they are not coming back with new capacity. They are coming back with old patterns wearing a softer face. And yet, many do not expect the most shocking part of all. You have changed. Silence did not only impact them, it transformed you. While they were wrestling with regret, you were rebuilding your nervous system. While they were wondering if they still had access, you were learning life without waiting. While they were replaying memories, you were creating new standards. The version of you who once accepted confusion out of love may no longer exist. This can surprise them deeply. They expected the same tenderness, the same openness, the same immediate forgiveness. They expected time to preserve your old availability. They assumed your care would remain frozen in place while they sorted themselves out. But healing changes people. You may still be kind, but now you are clearer. Still compassionate, but now boundaried. Still warm, but no longer naive. Still capable of love, but no longer willing to abandon yourself for it. That difference can unsettle them because it means silence did more than create distance. It created evolution. And when they sense that you no longer revolve around their return, another painful feeling can rise: rejection. This is one of the deepest ironies in these dynamics. The person who once created distance often struggles intensely when distance is experienced in reverse. They may have ignored messages for days, pulled away during closeness, avoided difficult conversations, withheld reassurance, kept one foot out the door. Yet when you become unavailable, they feel wounded by the very absence they normalized. Why? Because self-created distance feels like control. Receiving distance feels like loss. When they withdrew, it was on their terms. They could tell themselves they were choosing space. But when you withdraw, they must confront that they are no longer in charge of access. They are now experiencing what it feels like when someone emotionally steps back, and suddenly the pain makes sense. Suddenly unanswered messages feel heavy. Suddenly uncertainty feels cruel. Suddenly mixed signals feel destabilizing. Suddenly silence feels loud. Many people only understand the emotional impact of their behavior when life reflects it back to them. This reflection can be the beginning of empathy or the beginning of resentment. Some grow softer when they finally understand your pain. Others grow defensive because being on the receiving end feels unbearable. This is why some may accuse you of changing, being cold, being different, being distant. They are noticing boundaries and calling them cruelty because they were accustomed to unlimited access. They are feeling consequences and calling them rejection because they never expected limits. But boundaries are not punishment. They are truth made visible. And for the avoidant person, Truth can trigger an internal collapse few ever witness. Behind closed doors, many begin experiencing anxiety they cannot explain. The old coping methods stop working as effectively. The distractions feel thinner. The confidence they projected starts flickering. They may look normal publicly, while privately feeling fragmented. They question themselves, question their choices, question why meaningful connections never seem to last, question why they keep repeating the same cycle, question why independence feels emptier than expected. This hidden collapse often includes identity confusion. For years they may have believed they simply did not need much. But now they miss depth. They crave understanding. They want emotional safety. They realize they do need closeness, but only after pushing it away repeatedly. That realization can shake someone deeply, because it means the issue was never lack of need, it was fear of need. And fear can cost years. It can cost genuine love. It can cost peace. It can cost the person who once stood beside them, trying to build something real. Some begin spiraling privately over this. They compare every new connection to what they lost. They notice how surface-level many interactions feel. They realize chemistry is common, but emotional safety is rare. Attention is common, but devotion is rare. Excitement is common, but consistency is rare. What they dismissed as replaceable reveals itself as precious, and if you were the one left behind, hear this carefully. Their collapse does not erase your pain. Their sleepless nights do not refund your tears. Their regret does not automatically heal the wounds their inconsistency created. It may explain things, but explanation is not restoration. Many caring people delay their own healing, waiting for the other person to finally realize. Sometimes they do realize. Sometimes they collapse privately. Sometimes they regret everything. But your life cannot depend on someone else's delayed awakening. Because by the time some people understand your value, you have already paid too much to remain available. This is the sacred turning point for viewers who have loved someone emotionally unavailable. You do not need their collapse to validate your worth. You do not need their return to prove you mattered. You do not need their apology to justify leaving. You already know what you gave. You already know how long you tried. You already know how many chances were offered. That truth is enough. And yet if they are collapsing now, it is often because silence removed the final place they hid from themselves. When you were there, they could focus on your reactions, your needs, your emotions, your expectations. Now there is no one left to project onto, only themselves, only their choices, only the empty room where connection once lived, only the memory of someone who loved deeply and eventually loved themselves enough to walk away. That is why collapse can feel so intense. It is not just losing you, it is meeting themselves without distraction, and for many that meeting is the hardest moment of all, and this is where many people misunderstand what happens next, because once someone begins collapsing under the weight of loss, regret, and self-confrontation, movement often follows, messages appear, curiosity returns, energy shifts. The person who once seemed emotionally unreachable suddenly finds reasons to reconnect, but not every return is love. That truth can protect a healing heart. Sometimes people come back because they miss you. Sometimes they come back because they miss what you gave. Sometimes they come back because silence exposed loneliness. Sometimes they come back because the world outside your care felt colder than expected. Sometimes they come back because no one else mirrored them with the same patience, depth, and understanding. And sometimes they come back simply because pain seeks relief. This is why a return alone means very little. Contact is easy, consistency is rare, words are easy, emotional responsibility is rare, missing someone is natural, becoming safe for them requires transformation. Many emotionally avoidant people return not because they are ready to build something new, but because they want temporary comfort from the consequences of what they destroyed. They may feel genuine emotion in that moment. They may sincerely miss you. They may cry, apologize, reminisce, promise change, but sincerity in pain is not the same as capacity in relationship. Pain can make anyone sound awakened. Only sustained action proves growth. This is why viewers must listen with more than their heart now. Nostalgia can be intoxicating. It can take one late-night message, one familiar voice, one vulnerable apology to awaken every old memory of love. Suddenly the painful moments fade, and the beautiful moments glow brighter. The mind starts saying, maybe this time, but healing asks a different question. Not do they feel something, but have they become someone different? Have they learned how to communicate when uncomfortable? Have they taken ownership without blaming circumstances? Have they built consistency instead of intensity? Have they faced the fears that made closeness impossible before? Have they shown effort when no crisis forced it? Because if the answer is no, then the return may simply be another cycle asking for entrance, and cycles often arrive dressed as second chances. This is where the deepest truth for caring souls begins to emerge. You were never difficult to love. You were difficult to misuse forever. You were never too much. You simply reached a point where crumbs no longer felt like a meal. You were never asking for perfection. You were asking for reciprocity. That distinction matters because many people leave these dynamics believing they were somehow the reason connection failed. They think if they were calmer, less emotional, more patient, more attractive, less needy, more understanding, things would have worked. But genuine relationships do not collapse because one person needed care. They collapse when one person expects care while resisting mutual vulnerability. Your needs did not ruin the bond. Their avoidance of healthy intimacy did. And once you understand that something powerful changes inside you, you stop trying to earn what should have been given freely. You stop auditioning for the role of being chosen by someone who benefited from your devotion, while fearing your depth. You begin choosing yourself. That does not mean bitterness. It does not mean closing your heart. It means no longer confusing suffering with loyalty. It means no longer glorifying endurance as love. It means recognizing that being patient with someone else should never require abandoning yourself. Many viewers need to hear this because compassion can become a trap when it has no boundaries. Caring people often see wounds in others and decide their mission is to heal them. They believe enough love can reach where accountability has not. Sometimes love can support healing, but love cannot do someone else's healing for them. No amount of tenderness can replace inner work. No amount of loyalty can force self-awareness. No amount of waiting can make someone ready before they choose readiness themselves. This is why real change in emotionally avoidant people has a very specific look. It is not grand speeches. It is not dramatic returns. It is not tears alone. It is not jealousy because you moved on. It is not panic when access disappears. Real change is quieter and more difficult. It looks like consistency when emotions get hard. It looks like honest communication instead of disappearance. It looks like accountability without needing to be chased into it. It looks like learning to stay present when intimacy triggers fear. It looks like respecting your boundaries, even when they dislike them. It looks like effort sustained over time, not emotion displayed for a moment. Anything less may be movement, but not maturity. This is why the silence of the empath becomes so powerful. It creates the space where both people are forced to evolve or repeat. For the avoidant person, silence can expose patterns they could ignore while you remained available. For the caring person, silence can expose how much energy was being drained trying to maintain a one-sided bond. Both are now standing before truth. One truth says, I cannot keep running and expect real love to stay. The other says, I cannot keep giving and call depletion love. That is why walking away can become the turning point for both lives. Many people think walking away is losing. Sometimes walking away is the first win, the first time you choose peace over potential, the first time you choose clarity over chemistry, the first time you choose self-respect over being selected, the first time you stop trying to convince someone to value what they only appreciated in absence. And if they truly heal someday, that healing will have to stand on its own. It cannot depend on your suffering. It cannot require your endless patience as the training ground for lessons they refused to learn earlier. Some people do transform after losing something real. Pain humbles them, silence awakens them, consequences mature them. But even then, your responsibility is not to reward late growth at the cost of your own hard-won peace. You are allowed to say no, allowed to need proof, allowed to move on, allowed to love someone who does not need to lose you in order to value you. That last truth can change a life. Because too many caring souls have been conditioned to feel special only when chosen after pain. They think love is deepest when someone returns broken, apologetic, finally aware. But healthy love does not require destruction to become visible. Healthy love notices value while it is present. Healthy love protects what matters before it is gone. Healthy love communicates before silence becomes necessary. Healthy love may be imperfect, but it does not consistently depend on your tolerance for neglect. So if someone pushed you into silence and now collapses under the weight of what they lost, let compassion exist beside wisdom. You can understand their wounds without volunteering to be wounded again. You can care without re-entering chaos. You can forgive without reopening the same door. You can wish them healing without becoming the place they heal at your expense. And now we arrive at the final truth hidden inside this entire journey. Silence reveals everything. When the noise stops, motives become clear. When chasing stops, intentions become clear. When access ends, character becomes clear. When distance enters, value becomes clear. Some people only loved the attention. Some loved the convenience. Some loved the safety of being adored without needing to grow. And some, though deeply flawed, truly loved but were too frightened to sustain intimacy. Silence separates these truths better than arguments ever could. It also reveals something about you, your resilience, your capacity to survive heartbreak, your ability to transform pain into standards, your strength to leave what once felt impossible to release, your heart's ability to remain loving without remaining available to harm. That is the quiet victory many never celebrate enough. You did not just lose someone, you found yourself. You found the version of you that no longer begs to be valued. The version that understands love should feel reciprocal, not confusing. The version that trusts peace more than promises. The version that knows being alone is far safer than being emotionally abandoned beside someone. So if they collapse now, let them meet the consequences that growth requires. And if you are rising now, keep rising, because sometimes the silence they feared becomes the freedom you needed. Sometimes the ending they caused becomes the beginning you were meant for. And sometimes the greatest revenge is not revenge at all. It is becoming whole in the very place they expected you to remain broken.